It is a cold winter morning in the mid-1st century AD. Heavy northern snows cover the great Roman roads of northern Britain, blanketing the frontier between civilization and barbarism in a brilliant white. Roman soldiers patrol the length of Hadrian's Wall, staring out across the wilderness beyond, ever watchful for encroaching barbarians. To the south, outlines of Roman towns, villages, and forts dot the landscape, a comforting reminder of the presence and power of the Roman Empire. Cavalry patrols returning from expeditions in the north report of the ever-present Pictish raiding parties, who eagerly await their opportunity to ravage the rich lands south of the wall. Across the white plains, the whispers and war cries of the Picts, carried by the winds, wash over Hadrian's Wall. Auxiliary soldiers drawn from across the empire prepare to defend their stations, their families, and their lives. Welcome back to our series on life in the Roman world. In this episode, we will discuss the history of the northern garrison town of Vindeland, one of the best insights into the Roman world during the empire, and life on the Roman frontier in Britain.
Every week we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment. To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job.
Vindolanda was a Roman auxiliary fort just to the north of Hadrian's Wall, in northern England. The fortress was occupied from roughly 85 AD to 370 AD during the Roman period, and an estimated 400 to 500 years afterwards. It was first excavated in the 1930s by Eric Burley, a British historian and archaeologist who purchased the land where the museum now stands, and it became the family home of Eric and his wife. Since that purchase, the site has become a proud family project that has been excavated by Eric's sons and grandchildren into the present day. The site is of particular significance to Roman history, as excavations have uncovered some of the best preserved artifacts and writings, numbered in their thousands, allowing modern scholars to recreate what life may have been like for Roman soldiers and citizens on the empire's northernmost frontier. The fortress of Vindolanda was not erected during the Roman conquest of Britain. In the immediate years after Emperor Claudius brought Britannia under imperial control in 43 AD, the empire had little interest in expanding into the mysterious and hitherto unknown portions of their new island territory. Instead, the Romans were content with control of the land south of modern-day Liverpool, eager to develop the fertile lands in the south and support the native rulers of the tribes beyond the frontier through trade and military assistance in their own disputes, keeping them away from Roman territory. However, the political situation north of the frontiers deteriorated to such an extent that Roman intervention became essential. Boudicca's unsuccessful uprising in 60 or 61 AD had reignited anti-Roman sentiments in the tribes of Britain. Under Petilius Cerealis, governor between 71 and 73 AD, the Roman army quickly set about marching north and shattered the forces of Venutius, king of the Brigantians. In the process, they captured the Brigantian fortress of Stanwick, near modern Scotch Corner, between 71 and 74 AD. Only a few years later, the governor of Britain, Gnaeus Julia Agricola, completed the conquest of what is now Wales and northern England, and took his armies to the far north, advancing the Roman frontier to the gates of the Scottish Highlands. Agricola had driven more than 200 miles into the north, annihilating a native army deep in the highlands of what is now Scotland at the Battle of Mons Grappius, before withdrawing back to the lowland countryside. Ultimately, northern Britain was occupied with comparatively minimal effort compared to the other frontiers of the empire, with a single legion garrisoned at the fortress of Inchtuthil, north of Perth, in 82 or 83 AD. This fortress was only occupied for a few years before the garrison was recalled to Moesia in 86 AD, in modern-day Turkey, to deal with a Dacian invasion. Some archaeological findings suggest the site was inhabited for longer than previously estimated, though this is only a recent development. It was during this time that the first wooden fortifications of Vindolanda were established. Vindolanda was attached to the Steingate, a 38-mile Roman road that connected the fortress to the major towns of Lugovalium, modern Carlisle, and Caustapetrum, modern Corbridge. Beginning in 87 AD, the Roman garrisons in Scotland slowly withdrew towards the Steingate, gradually becoming the new frontier for northern Britain. Over the next 25 years, the garrison of Vindolanda was hard-pressed to protect the road and maintain effective patrols both to the north and south. During this time, Roman forts were still built using timber, and reconstruction was required on several occasions owing to the successful raids by Rome's northern neighbors. By the time Hadrian ascended to the imperial throne in 117 AD and succeeded his cousin Trajan, the empire was dangerously overextended, and the treasury was all but exhausted. Instead of favoring the military expansionist policies of his predecessors, Hadrian had the unique courage to halt territorial advances and focus on reorganizing the western frontiers. One of his most famous projects is the self-titled Hadrian's Wall, built between 122 and 130 AD by craftsmen drawn from the legions stationed in Britain. As the wall and its supporting forts were built, the garrison at Vindolanda slowly abandoned the wooden fortifications in favor of the stone fort at Housesteads, approximately 2 miles north of Vindolanda. Hadrian's successor, Antonius Pius, assumed the throne in 138 AD and, for reasons known only to him, ordered the advancement into Scotland. During this campaign, he ordered the construction of a cheaper and less expansive defensive fortification in 142 AD, the Antonine Wall. Soldiers along Hadrian's Wall were relocated further north during its construction, including the garrison of Vindolanda. For an unknown reason, the fortress was left unoccupied for a number of years during this period, while the garrison was stationed along the Antonine Wall, though it did not last long. Unsurprisingly, the excitement for the permanent occupation of Scotland didn't last long, and as early as 160 AD, Hadrian's Wall was recommissioned as the northernmost frontier of the empire. It was around this time that Vindolanda was reoccupied. The exact reason for the recommissioning of the fort, which found itself along the quietest part of the wall, has been met with some scholarly speculation. In all likelihood, the fort served as a military supply station along the major highway between the east and west coasts of northern England. The area was also rich in natural resources, such as iron, lead, and coal, and current excavations of the site have highlighted the important industrial sector the region became. The civilian population of Vindolanda, which continued to grow rapidly outside the fort walls, raised monuments dedicated by the Vicani Vindolandenses for the god Vulcan, patron of metalworkers. Caracalla, emperor from 198 to 217 AD, officially ended the stationing of the Antonine Wall, withdrawing all troops to Hadrian's Wall. Around this time, the frontier experienced a period of relative peace, allowing the civilian settlements around Vindolanda to grow rapidly in size and start to develop their economic potential. Unlike other frontiers, Vindolanda officially removed the ban on the marriage of soldiers, effectively creating a family dynasty in service on the frontier. Sons would inherit their father's posts in the garrison, which had become the permanent home for many Roman soldiers living there. As the centuries rolled on, Hadrian's Wall slowly became obsolete, due to the shifting socio-political instability within the empire. Little is known about what happened along the northern British frontier during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. However, it can be surmised that the prosperity of southern Britain was now more likely to be endangered by political corruption or inflation than by barbarian invaders. Britain had become an important factor for ambitious men seeking the imperial throne, and on several occasions had its garrisons redeployed for the fight against other pretenders. Traders wishing to work with Roman Britain were now approaching by sea rather than by land. Previously, most legitimate trade had travelled by land to northern Gaul and made passage to Britain under Roman management. Instead, with the strain of management within the empire, traders had to rely on their own means to get to Britain. This caused a gradual shift from infantry garrisons to heavy cavalry patrols to counter the much larger coastline. On the coast, the Classis Britannica, the provincial naval fleet of Britain, abandoned the purely military transport role it had filled for decades and began preventative patrolling missions. By the end of the 4th century AD, the Roman army and administration had long since left Britain, and the province had ceased to function. The traditional view that Rome abandoned Britain in an instant may not have applied to Vindolanda. The archaeological evidence suggests that the fort went through a period of gradual decline, its people living out their lives before finally leaving the fortress to the ravages of time. Now that a brief history of the fortress of Vindolanda has set the context, let us now look at life on the Roman frontier. For citizens and soldiers alike, life on the frontier was inherently fraught with danger. The life expectancy was low for frontier soldiers and their families, with the average lifespan for women around 28 years old and for men around 36, excluding infant and child mortality. Arthritis and rheumatism were likely the most frequent diseases, and outbreaks of plagues were also common, particularly towards the end of the 4th century AD. Many soldiers and civilians would have been partially crippled by half-healed wounds and fractures, lacking the civilized medical resources that the major cities enjoyed. By the time of Vindolanda's founding in the 1st century AD, the Roman army protected a frontier of almost 4,000 miles, with only 275,000 soldiers, comprised of 125,000 citizens who made up the legions, and 150,000 auxiliaries who supported them. Of these, anywhere between 3 to 4 legions plus auxiliary troops occupied Britain, a portion of which garrisoned the 73-mile fortification built for Hadrian. At Vindolanda, 2 civilian settlements, Vicus I and Vicus II, arose outside the west gate of the fort. The first occupied between 163 to 245 AD, and the second between 270 to 350 AD. The unusual gap in occupation time is confirmed by the vastly different styles of the 2 settlements, indicating that the builders of Vicus II knew nothing about the detailed plans of Vicus I. It is from these 2 sites, along with the fort, that archaeologists have been able to gain a unique insight into Roman life through the discovery of countless artifacts. These include a military bathhouse, cemeteries, religious sites, agricultural remains, industrial remains, personal items, food remains, tanning and leatherworking sites, textiles, pottery, coins, and most famously, writing tablets. The religious beliefs of Vindolanda, based on inscriptions and sculptured statuary monuments, were predominantly Celtic. Dedications to other Celtic gods include Veteris, Maguntis, Maponus, Matrona, and Dea Nutrix, found largely in reliefs and altars. However, the evidence of gemstones and jewelry tells a vastly different story. The Roman pantheon is represented by the Capitoline Triad, Rome's central 3 deities, Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. Other gods depicted include Mars, Mercury, Fortuna, Silvanus, Pan, Ceres, Daedalus, and other mythological creatures. The village council additionally set up an altar to the god Vulcan, in honor of Vindolanda's growing industrial trade. it is clear that gods from both the Roman and indigenous Celtic religions were worshipped in conjunction with each other, which mirrored the adopting nature of the Roman pantheon. One of the unique aspects of Vindolanda is the region's soil conditions, which were perfect for the preservation of bone. 2 major deposits have been discovered and have provided vital information for animal husbandry during Roman Britain. Deer, cows, pigs, sheep, goats, horses, dogs, and cats have been found in these deposits. A comparison of the bones from the first and second deposits suggests that the Romans successfully improved the size of their cattle by selective breeding throughout the occupation. Animals formed an essential role in frontier life, as many trades relied entirely upon them. Hunters, farmers, transport drivers, weavers, butchers, and leatherworkers, to name a few. Virtually all clothing in the region came from the backs of these animals. Aside from meat, trade, and labor, the animals also provided important materials for everyday items. Candles, knife handles, combs, pegs, dice, needles, spades, and even hair woven into strings to maintain the heavy catapults. The list is almost endless. Grains were shipped from the more plentiful lands to the south by the Classis Britannica, although local farming did occur. There is also evidence to suggest the locals gathered berries, fruits, and nuts. The Period 2 deposit has thousands of hazelnut shells and imported walnut shells. Cabbage stalk has also been found in the well of the stone fort, and is the only surviving evidence of vegetable consumption, although it is likely they were readily available. Vindolanda was also a site with thriving local industries, albeit these seem to only have developed during the second period of occupation. Pottery was largely imported from outside the region, but locally produced wares, called housestead wares, became increasingly common as the Romans utilized the region's clay deposits. Iron was also readily available during both occupation periods, and was likely mined and smelted locally, promoting the region's trade value and dedication to Vulcan. Despite a majority of the animals farmed in Vindolanda being utilized for meat, the hide, with the legs and head still attached, would have been sent to the tannery. Here, refuse heaps were found containing complete skulls of oxen, sheep, goats, horses, deer, and dogs, with an unusually high number of foot and hoof bones. These heaps are consistent with tanneries, indicating a thriving leather trade that produced locally made everyday items that would have been traded between the other frontier towns. Other industries at Vindolanda include milling, bronze working, weaving, and lime burning. Despite the distance from the great cities and towns of the empire, the civilians of Vindolanda possessed all the material comforts of Romanization. The doors had strong locks, iron bars over their windows, and water tanks and wells. The women decked themselves in beads, hairpins, bangles, and rings. Their homes were filled with box combs, bronze tweezers, and polished mirrors. The men had highly decorated bronze tunic fittings, belt attachments, and enameled buckles, which were minor works of art in their own right. The military bathhouse was frequently used by the inhabitants of Vindolanda, as indicated by the frequent repair work of the hot room floors. Given the ritualistic process of bathing in Roman society, it is likely the civilians lived in a certain amount of leisure. Vindolanda's most famous discovery was the 202 inscribed tablets, which can be divided into 2 broad categories: accounts and private correspondence. All relate to the regiment at Vindolanda before Hadrian's Wall was constructed. It is important to note that all of these tablets are incomplete, and as such only a fraction of the messages are available, and only a fraction of those messages have been deciphered. The private correspondence tablets consist of incoming mail to a variety of hands and a variety of people. Some are letters of recommendation, which typically aimed to help advance the career of a new recruit. These types of letters were common in Roman society, and nowhere more so than in the army. Another letter describes clothing sent to a recipient at Vindolanda, particularly an unspecified number of pairs of woolen socks and 2 pairs of underpants, or subligaria. Although these were not standard uniforms in the Roman army, there is a recognition of the requirement of acclimatized clothing. The accounts tablets relate to the military organization at the fort. Surviving fragments of this document, comprised of 5 large leaves, 2 medium-sized fragments, and 10 small fragments, describe the payments and supplies over a period of 8 days in June of an unspecified year. The first few lines discuss the payments, while the main part of the document describes the foodstuffs and quantities sent. This has given a wonderful insight into the diet of Roman soldiers at the beginning of the 2nd century. These correspondence tablets, which we have covered only briefly here, have provided invaluable insight into life on the Roman frontier that archaeological evidence cannot interpret alone. They are also of major importance to the study of ancient Latin. Ultimately, the collection of archaeological finds at Vindolanda and the multi-century story of this frontier fortress tells us that life on the Roman frontier during the Empire was as risky as it was lucrative. The ever-present threat of raids and death was balanced by the abundance of natural resources and opportunities for ambitious businessmen. At Vindolanda, on the northern borders of the known world, the civilians and garrison still enjoyed the comforts of Romanization. They had access to modern baths, a prominent position on a major Roman trading road, and local industries that drew from and supplied the region's towns and garrisons, all while including entertainment like state religious festivals. Due to the unique climate conditions of the region, Vindolanda has given modern historians and archaeologists a unique insight into Roman life during the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. It is estimated that only 27% of the site has been excavated, indicating at least another 150 years worth of digging to be done. Who knows what other curiosities await discovery beneath the earth, and what further secrets of life on the far-flung edges of the Roman world have yet to be revealed to us. More videos on the life and society of the ancient Romans are on the way. If you don't want to miss that and many other historical videos, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Recently, we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.